Nope, I don't
Hey,
want to do
everybody,
that.
and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Today, we have one of the wonderful chefs that was on this show a few days ago for the Christmas multi-chef special doing SOS free recipes. And his name is Chef Ramses Bravo. He is the executive chef at the True North Health Center. And today he is going to be doing a bunch of different salsas. Please welcome my brother from another mother, Chef Ramses Bravo. Good to have you back.
Hey, AJ, how are you?
I'm good. So today's your day off, right?
Yeah, it's usually Sunday, Mondays are my days off.
That's not a bad schedule, actually.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I always, even when your camera, even when I had like a real job, I always like having one weekday off and one weekend off. I like that better than just having the traditional Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, no, it works. Usually, just the one weekend day, but being able to, back when it was normal, dedicate one day to my daughter's school was important. So.
Nice. Well, also there's things you can't really do necessarily on the weekend that you get done on the weekday, like going to the bank and getting your hair cut. Well, actually your mom's a hairdresser, so it's probably never a problem for you to get a haircut.
That's not a problem, but I also Mondays are a great day to be off and go to the beach, and there's like hardly anybody there, which is nice.
Yeah, I like having a weekday off.
Yeah.
So salsa just means sauce, right?
Salsa, yeah. It literally translates into sauce. However, it is widely associated with Mexican food, red or green salsa, usually spicy. But
your camera just went away.
Yeah, somebody's trying to call me.
Oh, maybe you could if you put it on airplane mode, that would help.
Let me do that because I know he's gonna call back. It's my one of my purveyors wanting to know what I need for tomorrow. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you now.
Okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, it translates into like regular cuisine where you have a some sort of sauce to go with dessert, like berry sauce or something like that. The word would still translate. You'd say, like salsa de fresas or something, strawberry sauce. So, but when people hear salsa, they automatically think, enchiladas, tacos, or dancing, that too.
Great.
So, and so I have this sort of a salsa, call it a salsa fest today. I have tomatillos that I'm going to play around with for you, and then some tomatoes. So we're going to do red and green, but we're going to do multiple different types. We have some raw, we have some cooked, we have some roasted in the oven, I have some in the pot. So we're just going to play around with it. We'll end up making 6, 7. I'm not sure how many. But my idea for this is to show you simple ones and then sort of like a base and then build from that. So that way, in order to make 7 different salsas, you don't need 7 different set of ingredients. You just add a couple things here and there, and suddenly one can turn into 3. So that's the plan. And nice. I hope it works.
Nice. Well, I think a sauce is really important because when people say this diet is so hard or whatever, if you have a delicious sauce, that's really all you need.
Yeah, a really good, delicious sauce can turn a mediocre dish into a great dish. But if you have a great dish with a mediocre sauce, it doesn't do well. So it's very important. Absolutely.
I agree.
Cool. All right, so let me switch camera modes. Hopefully my little tripod here is going to hold up. And then
I see your chef puppet in the background.
Oh yeah, he's there.
I got one of those myself. You told me the lady that made it. I wanted to get one for Dr. Greger, but she said she was too busy. How can you be too busy for Dr. Greger?
How is he doing? He's always so busy.
Yeah, absolutely. He moved, I believe they said to Seattle. I don't know how anybody could ever leave Hawaii. That's my favorite state.
Oh, is that where he was?
Yeah.
Oh man, what is he doing? Okay,
Just
let me see. I think you can see the full range here. So I'm gonna have my working area here, cutting board. So yeah, I think that'll work. If things are out of view, can you just let me know so that I can, bring them closer or further?
your thing. Right now I see all the way to what looks like maybe a shallot, and I see your whole burner.
Okay, and then you see the Vitamix here, right?
I see the Vitamix,
okay,
right?
Cool. Yeah, I think that'll work. Hopefully the tripod will stay. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to start out with a simple, something that people recognize very easily, which is what they call the pico de gallo, which is diced tomatoes, and then get myself set up here. And then we go with a little bit of onion. Some people also call, in certain parts of Mexico, they call it little flag. And the reason for that is the Mexican flag has green, white, and red in its colors. So it would make sense to call this, what the word for it is banderilla, which is, it means a little flag. So we have the red, the white, and we're going to do a little bit of cilantro. Now I'm going to offer you guys lots of different tips as I go along. I wanted to have the tomatoes already done up, so we didn't spend too much time on that. Now, a lot of people ask me about cilantro. It's almost like you get 2 for 1. There are certain ones where I like to use just the stems, which is what I'm going to do for this guy right here. So I'm only chopping the stems. When I buy my cilantro, I just cut off the 1/2 inch at the very bottom that's like browned up. And then most of the stem I save. It has a slightly different flavor and texture than the actual leaves. So it's almost like you get 2 herbs into one, which I like. You only pay for it one time. So this is what would be considered, the pico de gallo thing. You mix it up, and this is what you see in a lot of restaurants as the non-spicy salsa.
I know. That's so good. That's just good on salads and everything. People are
this
asking
is great on salads. I often eat this with just a bowl of brown rice and maybe like a slice of avocado, and that's really just all I need. Some people do ask me, like, well, how do you get that? As most of you know, and the ones who don't, you'll find out now that my style of cooking is SOS free. So I don't use any salt, oil, or sugar. And traditionally, this would end up getting some salt in order to bring out flavor. And so some people ask, well, how do you get that extra bit of flavor without adding the salt? So here's what we're going to do. I like to add a touch of oregano, and I just take it from the container, and then when I pinch it, I grind it here in my fingers. So it chops it up a little bit more. And then, this I learned from my mom. She always adds a little touch of vinegar with her. Most of the time it's apple cider vinegar. Sometimes she will use some red wine vinegar as well. So it's just an extra touch of acidity to help sort of pickle the onions and the cilantro.
Do you ever put jalapeno in your pico de gallo?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get to all of that.
Okay. And there's a question, Ramses, does it really matter what kind of tomato or what kind of onion you use? And how long can salsa, when made fresh, keep in the refrigerator?
Okay. So as far as the onion goes, all onions have a slightly different flavor. I'm adding some ground cumin, by the way. Every onion has its own particular flavor. However, they're pretty interchangeable. the thing that for me determines whether I use a yellow onion or a red onion or a green onion is really color. So for example, for this guy, a white onion is going to bounce off of the red much better than a green onion. And green I already have with the cilantro, so that's why I'm using this. The red onion would also sort of look good in here, but not as good as the yellow or a white. So that's why I chose that onion for this particular thing right now. If I'm doing a tomatillo salsa, sometimes I like to use a red onion and not chop it up so fine. So there's the chopped up pieces of those purple chunks in there along with the green. So that color contrast works better than if I was using just a white onion, because the white sort of just gets lost in there with the green. So for me, it's more of a color thing more than anything. And then as far as, how long does the salsa last? So say I made this and then I decided to eat half of it and then the other half goes in the fridge. It probably lasts like 4 days in the fridge as is. And then you can certainly extend the lifespan of that if on the 4th day you're like, man, this is looking a little bit old, but I don't want to toss it. You can then cook it and prolong the shelf life of it a little bit. So that would give you another 3 days probably if you cooked it. Okay, so by adding a few touches, we can certainly add some jalapeno to this as well. And one thing about jalapenos, at least here in the US, I don't know why, and I can't figure out how to prevent it. They're a little bit on the inconsistent side. So it's hard to know what you're going to get out of a jalapeno here in the US. You don't know if it's going to be spicy or if it's just going to have a tiny little bit of flavor or no flavor at all, which happens often enough. I always assume they are going to be spicy, so I always wear a glove because you don't want to touch the seeds and the veins and then touch your face, touch any part of your body, go pee afterwards, and then you have a slight burn going on. So I always assume that they're going to be hot. For me, I always just take them and then just chop it up, seeds and veins and everything. If I'm doing it for somebody else, then I will take the time to cut the veins and the seeds out so that it's not so spicy. But I think everybody has their own level of tolerance to spicy. In my family, we always like it spicy. My mom always makes a little bit of salsa, or she always makes salsa, and then she takes out a little bit for the kids, for my niece and my nephew, and then she'll add the chilies. And so the kids have something that they can eat that they always want because they see everybody at the table grabbing salsa. So we're just sort of training them. They are 5 and 2, so slowly but surely they'll get some hot sauce in there as well. All right.
Do you ever make your own hot sauce?
Like the bottled hot sauce?
Yeah, like the bottled one.
Yeah, I've made it before. There was a patient at True North who really liked the Chili Gods sauce, and she sort of challenged me to replicate it, and I got it pretty close to the green one. So that was fun.
That's neat. So we have a couple of questions. Rebecca wants to know, can you ever freeze the salsa? And Sarah wants to know, what's in between Mexican oregano and oregano?
Okay, you can freeze anything. You can freeze a human, you just stick them in the freezer long enough, he'll freeze. The question really is, does it thaw out well? And the answer to that is, if it's a fresh salsa, it will not do well once you thaw it out. If it's a cooked salsa, yes, you can freeze it because by that time you've already broken up all the cells. More than likely you've blended it, so you've broken everything up anyways, and it'll thaw out just fine. And then what was the other question, AJ?
What's in between oregano and Mexican oregano?
Oh, it's just a different variety, sort of like a Thai basil versus a Italian basil, sort of in the same family, similar flavor, but you can taste the difference. Dried oregano has more of a herbal flavor to me versus a regular oregano has more of a sweetness to it. So it's a little bit Mexican oregano is a more savory versus the sweeter regular oregano. To me, at least, that's how I would describe it. Okay, so now you have your salsa here. You've got all the flavors. And then it's very, very important that you taste. As somebody asked, does it really matter what kind of tomatoes you use? Yes, it matters that they are ripe. It doesn't not matter what sort of variety you use. These were Roma tomatoes that I am using for the demo here. But you can certainly use the larger red tomatoes. I tend to stay away from hothouse tomatoes. Because I know that they're not going to be as flavorful. I also will sometimes use an heirloom tomato for a salsa, but if I do, I'm already, I have it in my mind that I'm going to have to counterbalance the higher sweetness level within that salsa. So it's just sort of a, taste your product as you go along. So this is very important. I always taste as I go along. The jalapeno was definitely spicy, which I love. And so I think I could use just a touch more on the vinegar. And usually for something like this, I always like to let it sit around like 20 minutes, just so that the vinegar has the time to interact with all the stuff. So this would be perfect. As is for me. I know for some people this would be like, whoa, too spicy. But ideally you want to kind of know who's showing up to dinner and then, save a little bit off to the side for those guys before you add the jalapeno. And so from here, right now it's winter, so this may not be useful to you right now, but during summertime, you can use this same base and have some diced mango or pineapple or both. And then suddenly you have this sort of tropical salsa thing going on where you have this like potato and mushroom tacos. And then, it's summertime, it's hot. You have some shredded cabbage to go with that. And then suddenly you now have a more of a tropically sort of flavor salsa, which is really nice. I really enjoyed those kinds of things on a hot summer day.
Yeah, mango salsa is probably my favorite.
Yeah. And if you don't have vinegar, I'm not adding, this particular vinegar to apple cider because I want the apple cider flavor. I'm just adding it for some acidity. So you can certainly add some lime in there instead, or maybe you have a little bit of, like I mentioned, red wine vinegar, or maybe you're in a pinch and maybe you can use some brown rice vinegar. That's all perfectly fine. You're not adding it to taste that particular vinegar. You're just adding it for that acidity factor in there. So, all right. So now I'm going to taste this one too. Get a couple pieces of mango. That extra layer of sweetness bounces off perfectly with the spiciness of the jalapenos. So, this is really nice. This is really nice. If I knew that this was going to be a pineapple salsa, maybe I would hold off on the vinegar because pineapple can be have that acidity in there, the tartness. So maybe I would either hold off on the vinegar until I tasted it first, or maybe just add half of the vinegar if I am going to use pineapple in there instead of mango. So just a heads up on that. I have done it before too with some orange juice. Some orange juice could also help that process as well. So it's all good. Okay.
Ramses, Mary says, can you put the seeds and ribs into your scrap bag for making broth for a kick, or would that make the broth bitter?
It will not make it bitter. It will give it a kick. And if that's something you would enjoy, absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Um, Let me stick with the raw sort of salsas, and then we'll get to the cooked ones, if that's all right.
Sure.
So we're now going to use Vitamix. And so this is what a tomatillo, here, let me back up a little. So this is what a tomatillo looks like. It's in the sort of tomato family. It is a nightshade for those of you who wondered. Although if you have an issue with a nightshade, this whole class is probably not for you. But so it comes with a husk that you peel off. So it's like the little thing you remove. And then if you touch it, it's sort of sticky. So you have to rinse this. Sometimes the husks this here will start to go bad a little bit, and then they'll leave a little bit of sort of residue on the tomatillos. So you have to rinse them or wipe them off at the very least. And so that's what I have here. And now we're going to get it into the vitamins. So I'm just going to give this a quick chop.
Somebody sent me the purple tomatillas as a present. They were so beautiful, and I roasted them and made a salsa with them.
Yeah, purple tomatillos, from my understanding, they're a different varietal of tomatillos. They are, in fact, purple in color. They have this sort of red onion sort of color to them on the outside. They're typically smaller than regular tomatillos. The flavor is almost identical. The one thing about them is that when you cook them, they do turn green, and then you wouldn't know the difference had you cooked them. So the only way to know that they were purple is to leave it as a raw kind of salsa. Okay, so I have that in there. I'm going to add a little bit of, actually, I already have this here. We're going to use a white onion in there. And then I'm going to put them away here. Give me a sec. Give me just 1 second. Here they are. I put them back in the fridge. So I had some garlic cloves. So a couple of garlic cloves go in. And then cilantro was going to go in. Tomatillos have quite a bit of moisture in them. So you don't really need to add any water or vegetable broth or any of such things, because they're mostly liquid. So I'm going to start this guy on low. I'm going to start chopping up. My cilantro's stuck on the lid. There we go. All right. So that's a fairly simple, there you go. Fairly simple green salsa. I don't chop it up so much because I like the tiny little darker green specks in there, excuse me, so that it gives me a nice visual. However, you can certainly add a little bit of the dried oregano, the cumin, coriander, or this is one of the dressings slash salsas that we do for True North. We will take it as I just showed you, And then we make it a little creamier by adding some avocado to it. And because avocado is already green, it doesn't mess with the color profile. And then it just gives it a creamier, richer sort of texture and flavor, which I like. There we go. So I don't know how well you can see it. We're going to pour this in here so you can see it better. There we go. So now we have this nice green salsa here. And then, of course, I taste it. So I figure out where it's at. And then I go, it could use a little bit more cilantro. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit, chop it. I didn't add any spices to it, so I'm also going to add a little bit of cumin. If you have granulated onions and garlic, which I'm out of right now, that's the one thing that it's missing. It's the granulated garlic in there. A lot of times people will use granulated onion and garlic as a replacement for salt. So sort of like if you're going to do some roasted potatoes, and normally you would sprinkle them with salt before you bake them in the oven. We do this often at work. We will sprinkle them with granulated garlic and then bake them. And then they have this really nice flavor to them. So go a little bit of extra cilantro.
Barb says she didn't know you could use tomatillos completely raw. She was told to put them in boiling water for a minute before using. But you could also roast them if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. I have a full show for you.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, it's okay.
So people are asking.
Yeah, don't worry, guys.
But you're right about the purple ones though, because when I roasted them, they were no longer purple.
They were no longer purple. Yeah. Okay. So I diced up a little bit of avocado in there as well, so that it's sort of like an extra bonus for somebody who takes a spoonful of that salsa, and then there's a couple of pieces of diced avocado, and there's like, oh my God, look at this. So mix it all up, then taste it with a little piece of avocado. That's much better.
It looks delicious. Sarah says, when you add the avocado to the tomatilla, will it get brown the way that regular guacamole does?
It does not. I mean, eventually it will if you leave it, 3-4 days later. But this will stay nice and green for, about 3 days, which is nice. There's enough acidity in the tomatillos to prevent the avocados from turning. So it's good. It's good. All right, moving along. So now we'll start with the cooked salsas. Let me just wipe my board here a little bit. We are out of white onion here, but that's okay because I don't think we need any more.
That's a very nice cutting board. Did somebody make it for you?
My daughter, Lulu, made this for me. I'll show you. I don't know how well you can see it. She's got her signature on there.
Little bit lower. And talk.
Lourdes, she made this last year on the 21st of November.
Was it like in a wood shop? That's really beautiful.
Yeah, her high school requires wood shop for all students. So she made this for me, which is like one of my most treasured pieces here in my kitchen.
It's really beautiful.
It's got this sort of weird shape. And I asked her, what the heck is that? And it's supposed to be the silhouette for Sonoma, which is where we live. So this is the S right here. And then so-and-so, but yeah, she made that for me. Okay, so now we get to the cooked salsas, and I'll show you what I have here. So here we have the tomatillos that somebody mentioned. You don't have to always cook them, but this is a traditional way of doing it. So in here I have the tomatillos. I have some serrano chilies, which are the smaller. So here's a jalapeno, and here's a serrano chili. These are much more reliable in heat and level of spiciness. So if you want something a little bit more consistent, these will be your guys here. I do have some garlic cloves that went in here, and you'll see onions as well. Okay. So here's what we're gonna do now. So all I did was I put this in a pot and I boiled it with water for probably 15 to 20 minutes. It didn't take very long. So now let me just rinse this guy off here really quick. We're gonna do one blender for the greens and one for the reds. All right. So after it gets boiled, you see that all of the tomatillos sort of start to break down. So you see how I can barely hold it. Soft they get. So normally your blender would be nice and clean, but we're just gonna go ahead and add it to it. All right. So this is more of a enchilada type of salsa. So you get that in the blender and you blend it really fine. Oh, and I did forget the cilantro. Okay, so let me show you what this guy looks like now. So it's really nicely blended, but you see how much color it lost. So we went from, put one of these guys back. I have one left here. We went from that green to that almost yellowish green. So to recuperate some of that color, cilantro gets added often, and it's also for flavor, but a lot of times it's just for color. So you see that we just recovered it a little bit. So again, this is more of your enchiladas, chilaquiles, very sort of almost maintenance free. Throw it all in the pot, boil it, put it in the blender, turn it on, and boom, done, kind of a thing. To this, once again, you can use the oreganos or the cumin, coriander, or what my mama likes to do is you go from a very sort of a very mild. There's no spice in here at all. She likes to add dry chilies, and in this case, we're going to use a little bit of chiles de árbol, which is a spicy, very spicy. And I'm not going to blend them all the way. What I'm trying to do within the blender is basically just chop them up. And just like that, I think you can see the little specks of the red chili in there. And now suddenly we went from this very mild kind of thing to a definitely spicy salsa in here. Oh yeah, that's gonna work. Much spicier. One thing, this is also another thing that I cannot figure this out. I've asked my grandma, who makes salsa just about every day of her life, and either she knows and won't tell me, or she doesn't know herself. When you make a salsa and it's sort of still hot, it has they tend to be spicier. Once they cool down, a lot of times you lose the spice. I don't know why that is. It has driven me nuts for many years, and I'm still trying to figure out the answer to that. I tell you that because sometimes you make a salsa and you're like, oh my God, this is so spicy, no one's going to eat it. Just let it cool down and taste it again. And more than likely, it'll mellow out just enough so that everybody will be able to eat it. Okay. So now I'll show you what this guy looks like here. To this, for a better show, you can also add a little bit more diced onions. This would be, at this point, more of a garnish than anything else. I'm taking some red onion here. Now we're garnishing the salsa here. So in goes the red onion and a little bit more cilantro. And this is just so that it looks prettier, so it looks more appetizing. Once it's at the table, it's more inviting. As I mentioned, if you just boil it, blend it, and sort of ready to go, that's more of your typical enchilada thing. But if you notice with enchiladas, there's always garnishes on top. There's the lettuce and the radishes and the cilantro sprigs and all that go on top of enchiladas. And plus, the filling that's spilling out of the enchiladas themselves. So it's always nice to get a little bit more color and flavor and texture. So now suddenly, if you are pouring this on a taco or something and you see all those specks in there, it's just nicer. You're thinking, wow, somebody took the time to make sure there's plenty of flavor in there. Okay. Well, now clean up as I go along here. Now I'll show you what I have over here. So this I roasted prior to the show here. There we go. A nice view. So we're going to do a couple of cooked salsas. I have some of the same Roma tomatoes, which I cut in half, and then I put here in a pan with parchment paper, some slices of red onion in here, and some garlic cloves, and that got roasted. Within that same pan, on the other side, we have some tomatillos, which we also roasted with some yellow onions, some garlic cloves, and then over here, I have the other half of this poblano pepper. So this is what this guy looked like before going in the oven. And this is what I like to do for a roasted tomatillo sauce. So what happens is, in the pot, as I showed you, you're adding a bunch of water to the salsa because you want that extra bit of liquid in there. Because again, if you're using it for enchiladas, the tortillas are going to go in there, and the tortillas are going to soak up a lot of that liquid. So that's why you would do it with the water, which, by the way, you can do either red or green. I could have also done, a set of the red salsa. So, again, tomatoes, onions, garlic in the pot with some water, boil it for 15, 20 minutes, and there you go. There's your red salsa. However, in the oven here, this gets much more concentrated because rather than adding water to the tomatillos or the tomatoes, we're actually evaporating it out of them. So this is a much more concentrated flavor here. And where'd my blender go? Right over here. I got to get rid of all this salsa here now. Okay. So now I'm going to add all my stuff here.
You have time for a few questions?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, first of all, Caroline says she's loving your advanced cooking course. And there's a question, how do you know how to pick good tomatillos and what do you use epazote in?
Okay, so for tomatillos, let me bring my guy over here again. I'm gonna put this here hanging on the ledge because there's something I want to say about him. So for tomatillos, let me set this off to the side. So let me pull the husk back, like I'm rewrapping this guy. So a lot of times they'll start to burst here through the husk. And you'll be able to see the color of them. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad tomatillo. So as long as when you hold it, it's firm. Okay. If you hold it and it's sort of gushy, it's too old, it's going bad, choose a different one. So as long as it's nice and firm, it's going to be good. What you want to look for is the color of the greenness of it. So what happens is the greener they are, the more tart they're going to be. When you go to the grocery store and then you see the big mount of tomatillos there, some of them, as I mentioned, they'll start to sort of burst open, but nothing wrong with just peeling a little bit back and seeing the color inside. If they're a little bit more on the yellowish side, they're going to be less tart. They're going to be more, just a slightly sweeter. So that would be your sort of gauge. I always like to go to the store and get a combination of both, because sometimes if you go for nothing but dark green ones, your salsa is just too tart, too sour, and it's then you have to add extra chilies just to sort of balance that out. But if you have a combination of the dark green ones and more of the yellowish greens, you get a nicer flavor overall. So that's how I choose tomatillos. And what was the other question on there?
What do you use epazote for?
Oh, epazote. So that's an herb, a fresh herb. I use it for salsas, black beans, tortilla soup, tacos, anything. Epazote has this sort of smoky basil / cilantro combination. It's different from any other herb out there. There is a dried version of it, but as with any herbs, fresh and dried are two completely different things, sort of like a grape and a raisin. So you can't really compare the two. It's a little bit harder to find. You have to go to a Latin market in order to find it. You won't find it at a regular Whole Foods, Safeway, Kroger's type of deal. But it's a wonderful, wonderful herb. And again, black beans, tortilla soup, and some salsas, always epazote. Okay. So let me set this off to the side. We'll bring it back in just a second when we do the red salsa. I always like doing one of these, the poblano pepper. So this is your chile relleno pepper. I always like adding a little bit, at least half of one here. This is a small amount, so I only did half. Normally it would be, a whole one or maybe even two because I'm cooking more. But it just gives it how can I say it? It's just a much more complete flavor than if I don't have it in there. And I can't remember how I discovered it. If you don't have a poblano pepper, a green bell pepper is a good substitution. And what I think it is a green bell pepper, whether it's a poblano or just a green bell pepper, they have, and this is not scientific, I didn't read this up anywhere, this is just how I feel about this. I believe that they have a higher natural sodium content in there. So once you have that in that salsa, it just gives it a much more complete flavor. It just makes it better, for me. So I'm going to now. All right. And you'll see here in just a second, I'm going to pour this into another container. You'll see the difference as to just how much thicker and how much slower this pours versus how runny this guy is. So remember, we added liquid to this and then we evaporated it out of this one. So your yield is typically going to be much lower here, but the flavor difference is definitely worth the trying it this way. Give it a quick taste. Oh man, that's good. Not spicy at all, because I didn't add any jalapenos. So certainly within that pan, you could also roast some of the serranos or some of the jalapenos. This one is just concentrated. That's really what it is. It's just a concentrated salsa flavor, which is really, really nice. All right, so we'll set those off to the side. We are done with this guy. We're gonna grab our other Vitamix container, okay? And now, we are now going to add the roasted tomatoes to this guy. So there goes my roasted Roma tomatoes, the onions, and the garlic cloves.
Ramses, somebody's asking if you can recommend a good brand of induction burner and how spicy poblanos are, would you say, and must they be roasted and peeled?
They 80% of the time, 85, maybe even 90% of the time, they're not spicy at all. They are almost an undetectable smidge higher than a bell pepper. But there is that 1 out of 10 peppers that will be as spicy as a serrano. I don't know how to tell the difference. Chilies, as much as I love them, they drive me crazy sometimes too, because I don't know, how to tell the spiciness of them. As I'm looking at them, sort of at the grocery store. So it's a sort of a roulette with them. And then what was the other question, AJ?
If you could please recommend a good induction burner.
Oh yeah. I have the mini tripod here on top of the burner itself because I always keep this right here is my stove. I have an electric stove here at the place where I live. I don't own it. I rent this place. And so I can't change the stove. I hate it. And for that reason, I always have induction burners on top of what I really use this as counter space. Electric stoves are just so unresponsive compared to an induction burner. Let me finish the class, and then afterwards I will take the camera and point it to the brand of it. I'll tell you where to find it. I'm just concerned that if I move the camera now, then I won't be able to get it right because I think I have it just perfect here. So everything shows.
I understand. Mitzi wants to know if you've ever done any cooking demos with your mother or your grandmother.
No, I haven't. And that's a good suggestion. My mother's fully bilingual. I don't know how camera shy she might be. I think my grandmother would be okay to doing it. But yeah, thank you for the suggestion. But she's hard, man. If I ask her questions about, like all these little tips that I'm giving you about, the specific chilies and the roasting, how that increases or decreases the volume, she either expects me to know or she won't tell me. She's one of those people that you have to trick her into giving you a recipe because she won't give you any information. So it's always fun to cook with her, but she knows if I'm in there in the kitchen with her, she knows I'm going to be asking questions, and she does her best to dodge them all.
That's so funny.
I don't know why, but okay. So this here, we're gonna take it to the blender now. Oh, here, I forgot about something. This is why I had one off to the side. So once roasted, you can very easily peel the skins off of a tomato. So if you're roasting a tomato and say you're not using salsa, you're roasting them for like a salad or a pasta sauce, and they're going to be just sort of rough chopped. Tomato skins always tend to get, sort of find every crevice in your teeth. So once roasted, those skins just peel right off. So that's another trick that you can use. So say you're going to do like a arugula salad with some oven roasted tomatoes, and then you want to do a little bit extra step for all the people you're feeding. You roast the tomatoes, you peel the skins off, and they're just, so they melt in your mouth rather than, having to chew through that skin. All right. So, let's see what we got here. So again, we have this sort of thick salsa here. This is a very, very basic, almost just like a tomato ragu more than a salsa. I taste it. It's got this wonderful, intense tomato flavor. But we can certainly take it in multiple directions. So from here, I'll show you what I have here. This is what's called a guajillo chili. And chilies have different names when they're fresh than when they are dried. So, give you an example. This is a jalapeno. Once dried, it turns into a chipotle pepper. Okay, so the name changes, and all dried chilies take on this dark red or black sort of color. So this guy right here is called a guajillo, Guajillo. So guajillo. This is a very, very mild chili. No spiciness at all, but it has a good amount of flavor. And so over here, what I did was I have a couple of them soaking in water so that when I add it to the blender, it will easily chop up. So I can add a couple of these in there. I've never had a guajillo that was spicy. They just have this nice depth of flavor to them. And so we can certainly add that in there. I think you'll be able to tell that the color intensified. So it's still this, very thick salsa, but now it's got a redder, darker red color to it. And now it's starting to taste like salsa. Now I taste a little bit of chili, no spice in there at all whatsoever, but it just tastes a little bit different. You can certainly add chipotle. Now, if you want to, I have one chipotle that was soaking, so I'm going to add that to it. With salsas, the more varieties of chilies you use, the more complete, more complex flavor you're going to get. Okay, so now the chipotle went in there. And another spoon here. Now I taste it. And now it's definitely got a kick to it. So as to how many peppers you use, which varieties, totally up to you. Typically, the smaller the pepper, the hotter they're going to be. And that is sort of a 95% of the time rule of thumb. Um, the more you use, obviously, the hotter it's going to get. And then there was one last thing I wanted to do here for you. Oh, here. Your soaking liquid, you can always save, and this could be your cooking liquid if you did the boiled salsa version of it. Or if you are in a pinch and then you made this much salsa and then suddenly a few extra people showed up and you're like, man, that's not gonna be enough. You pour some of that liquid in there and just sort of thin it out a little bit, stretch it. And then to this, we can certainly add one final touch. I'm gonna take some cilantro, throw it in here, and I'm not gonna blend it. I'm just going to chop it the same way I did for one of the green salsas. So just a few seconds. And now I'm gonna go ahead and pour this for you. There we go. Now you see that dark, intense tomato in there with the little specks of red, which work out nicely. Okay, so here's the salsa, and then you can always add, I'm adding here a touch of smoked paprika just to give it another sort of layer of flavor in there. So you might say, well, you know, my chilies were smoked, you know, slowly smoked overnight, yada, yada, yada. But all you did was just add a little bit of smoked paprika to it. The vinegar factor can always come in here. Because this was a roasted salsa and we dried out the moisture, we intensify the flavor so the tomatoes got a little sweeter. So a small touch of the vinegar can just round out the flavor, give it a little bit more contrast. A little smokiness, a little bit of sourness, and wow, this guy really popped up just a little bit more. So you know, for salsas, it's really more about tasting as you go along, because if a recipe calls for, you know, one jalapeno or one serrano, not every serrano is going to be the exact same size. Not every poblano is going to be the exact same size. A jalapeno could easily be spicy or not. Same with the poblanos. Your tomatoes could be a little bit more or a little bit less ripe. So it's really as you go along, you taste, and then you taste again, and then you taste again, so that you get it just right. So a recipe for a salsa, it's more of a suggestion, sort of a roadmap kind of thing, but you know, you don't have to go with the specific route to get from point A to point B. So yeah, that's kind of a salsa fest here. So we have a few of the raw. We did a couple raw ones here with the pico de gallo, which would turn into this tropical-y thing. We did our green salsa, fresh tomatillo with the avocado in there to get it a little bit creamy. To show you the difference between a boiled salsa versus a roasted. And then we did our roasted version of the red salsa. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, thank you. Let me just, I'll just go through the feed. So Barb says, could you use a drop or two of liquid smoke for smokiness?
You could, but my experience with liquid smoke is that it's sort of like, so I added a little bit of smoked paprika in here. If I had added a drop or two of the liquid smoke, I would have had this nice tomato salsa in there. Next to it, I would have tasted a smoked log in there with it. To me, liquid smoke never really marries well when you use it for cooking, unless it's a long, prolonged cooking time. So like if you're roasting something in the oven for 3 hours, the flavors do eventually sort of combine together. But if you're just adding it or you're only cooking it for a little bit, it just tastes like a piece of a log you pull from the fire in along with all the other stuff. That's my experience, and I've experienced that with salsas, and also trying to cook a smoky red lentil stew. The flavors just never came together.
Great, thank you. So, and Debbie says, don't forget about the induction burner. You were going to show it.
I won't.
Before it ends. Diane says, can you tell how hot a pepper is just by the smell? And what can you use instead of smoked paprika?
There's nothing you can use instead of smoked paprika, really, because the reason I'm using it is just for another layer of flavor to give some smokiness to the item. It's not necessary. It's just a little bit more complexity. And then as far as the chilies, the best thing I can tell you is you can't smell them. I don't think you can. But what I advise people is if you take a jalapeno, and if you don't know how spicy it's going to be, take a small slice of it, if you're brave enough, and taste it. And then you go, okay, this guy has very little flavor. My other peppers were a little bit spicier. So then you go, okay, I know that this guy is not going to have that much heat, so I can use more or less of it. If you take a small slice of it and it's really spicy, you go, woo, I'm only going to use a tiny bit of it. That's really more of a foolproof way of using peppers. And again, it's, taste.
Great, thank you. Do you store jalapenos in the fridge or on the counter? Stephanie wants to know.
Fridge. You prolong the shelf life. You can certainly leave them out if you know you're going to use them within a day or two, but they will start to wrinkle up. They will start to get soft spots. So if you know you're going to use them fairly quickly, you can certainly leave them on the counter. But if you don't know when you're going to use them, it's best to keep them in the fridge.
Sherry says you should do a class on Mexican chilies and salsas. And Anita says she's in the advanced class and hopes that peppers are covered in the class because she loves salsa.
There is a couple of places where peppers are used, yes.
Right. And so, guys, I've been posting the link to his books in the class in the show notes. He does have 2 cookbooks. Granny says, could you use the soaking water for the chilies for anything?
Yeah, I mentioned that this you can save and use it for the next time you're going to do a boiled salsa. Or if you need to stretch out the volume for this guy, you can certainly use it that way. You could also throw it, somebody asked about using chilies in their vegetable broth. So you can certainly use that liquid as part of the cooking liquid. Yeah.
And do you find most of these like at a Latino grocery store other than maybe jalapenos?
Everything that I got came from, you can find at Safeway. Most everything that I got actually came from True North because that's my grocery store. I just grab everything there. But everything here, you can find at a Safeway type of place. If you're on the East Coast, you may have to go to a Latin market. I've never experienced shopping on the East Coast, except when I lived in West Virginia, and that was just a different world. So if you're in California area, a Safeway will have everything I just showed you. Whole Foods will have everything I just showed you. Certainly a Latin market will definitely have everything, and they'll have maybe even more varieties of the dried chilies. So it's not necessary to have a Latin market near you for this.
Great. Gina says, do you know what a pasilla chili is called when fresh or dried?
Pasilla is this guy when it's dried. So poblanos go to pasillas.
Oh, good to know. All right. I saw how long it was about the roasting times. Where did that question go?
Roasting times. If your oven works the way it should be about a 20 minutes at 350-degree convection or 400 non-convection. As I mentioned, my stove here is not very good. And so what I did was I roasted at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes, and I wasn't getting much color out of my tomatillos or my tomatoes. So what I did was I switched it to broil for about 5 minutes, and that gave me that nice roasted look after having been roasting for 20 minutes. So you can always get that extra push that way.
Great. Susan says, do you clean your Vitamix, or how do you clean your Vitamix in order to avoid the plastic getting cloudy?
You can't avoid that. I've researched it, and you can't avoid it from going cloudy. I don't know why that is, but I wish they would stay nice and clear, but they don't.
You know, that's interesting because I also have the Blendtec, and yet the Blendtec also stays clear. I wonder why.
I don't know. That's a good observation. But yeah, I've looked into it, and
yeah, that's interesting. Okay, wait. I saw something about what's your go-to instead of oil.
that's a recipe by recipe thing. Certainly in most Mexican household, Mexican restaurants, the enchilada sauce here. So once the enchilada sauce gets made, it then gets fried. So you'd have a pan with some oil in it, and it's almost like you're sauteing the salsa. So that always happens. So for any of these, the go-to is go to nothing, because we didn't use any of it here. So it's a case by case kind of scenario. If they want to give me an example of a specific dish, I could probably help them out a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I haven't forgotten about the induction burner.
Right. Do you remove the seeds from tomatoes and tomatillos?
Not from tomatillos. They're too small, and removing seeds from one tomatillo would take you at least an hour. From tomatoes, you can. I will demonstrate that really quick. So when I had my pico de gallo here, I had already taken the seeds out. And we'll move this a little closer here. Remove everything else. Excuse me. All right. Let me wipe down my knife real quick. Where's my rag?
And Gina wants to know if your family made tamales on Christmas.
They did not, but we made tamales at True North, and people really liked them.
Yeah. And what do you serve these sauces on at True North? Aaron wants to know.
So we made the roasted tomatillo version and the roasted tomato, the more intense ones. So these two were served for the tamales. This we often serve as a condiment on its own, just for people, or sometimes if we do like a baked potato bar or a tostada bar, this will be offered as well. This I mentioned we use as sort of like a dressing for people for their salads, a tomatillo dressing.
Stephanie wants to know if you ever use dried cilantro in recipes.
No. I actually have not. I don't think I've ever used dried cilantro. What I will use is coriander, which is the seeds from cilantro. That I use often. But yeah, no, I don't think I've ever used dried cilantro.
Oh, interesting. Ruth Ann says, do you compost?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. And Sarah says, what's the proportion of the cooked items, tomatillo, garlic, serrano? With salsa, there's no exact measurements, right? I mean,
yeah, no, that's kind of what I was trying to touch on. There's no exact measurements because, again, a tomato, if I say this recipe calls for 8 tomatoes, 8 Roma tomatoes, well, maybe your Roma tomatoes are more, this size or, that thick, or maybe they're smaller. or they're not as ripe, or they're a little bit more ripe. So for salsas, it's a taste. You have to taste, 1, 2, 3 times, and then taste again.
Right.
So,
And there's a question if you have any suggestions for latex-free food prep gloves.
I don't. Gloves are very hard to find right now. We are having a hard time making sure that we have enough gloves for work, just because there's such a high demand. So whatever you can find at this point, really.
Can you use guajillo chilies?
Guajillo chilies, yeah, that's what we use for the beginning of the red roasted salsa.
Nice. I might have asked that and missed it. Sorry, I'm going back through just to make sure I didn't miss anything, because my little feed goes really, really fast.
So why don't you look in there, and then I'll talk about this here real quick. So you'll notice that the stem part here is going to stay on. So I'm going to take my knife and cut this guy in half. Okay. So now I got 2 halves, and then I'm going to take my knife and cut through the core here. So this is what it looks like now. It's sort of a split in there. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to start from the back side. Okay. As my knife cuts, my fingers over here spread the tomato out. Okay. So it's this motion. All right. So I'm going to start from the back. And as I cut, my other fingers remove. So now I've removed all the core, the seeds, and everything else. There's usually a couple more seeds that stay behind, but those you can sort of scrape off. And then, boom, I have a whole half of a tomato that's seed free. And then from here, slice it if that's what you need, or dice it, which is what I did for the pico de gallo. Here you go. That's how I remove seeds from a tomato.
Nice. Okay.
You find any more questions?
Yes, I actually did. Somebody's having trouble logging into the course. I'm sure there's a customer service email for that.
Yeah, there is. I can tell you right now, the easiest thing is go to bravopb.com, and I'll have a card here. Go to bravopb.com, and then towards the top right, there's a button that says My Courses. And then if you click on that, it'll prompt you to log in using your email and password.
Thank you. And Georgia says, how do you season pinto beans without salt or lard?
Well, oil and salt kind of go together. The more oil, whether it be oil, lard, butter, olive oil, whatever it is, the more that you use, the more sort of bound you are to needing salt. Because what happens is, as you cook, so for example, if I have my salsa here and there's a bunch of oil in here, and then I go and taste some of it, what happens is the oil is going to coat my tongue, meaning my taste buds are going to get blanketed by oil, and then the flavor is going to have a hard time registering. That's why the more oil you use, the more salt you need in order for the flavors to penetrate into your taste buds so that you're able to actually taste the food. You'll notice this for people that, back in the day where we could sit at a restaurant, sometimes you might have encountered somebody who sat down and before they even tasted their food, they grabbed the salt shaker and then they're like shaking their food before they even tasted it. Just because the more oil you use, the more inclined you are to use salt, and the more salt you use, the more your body sort of adjusts to the level of how much sodium you put into it, and so therefore you need more, and then more. It's sort of like a vicious cycle almost.
Right. And
so for the beans, to answer his question, so for the beans, I would then start to remove the lard. Take the lard out first of all. That will decrease the amount of salt you need. And then from there, there's things like smoked paprika, which I showed a little bit. Smoked paprika is a tremendous flavoring, so that you get enough flavor from beans and like soups and stews. Also, specifically for beans, a chipotle or chipotle powder specifically with granulated garlic and onions and cumin. That would give you a good spice seasoning mix for those beans.
Thank you. Joanne wants to know if you could recommend a good brand of cookware.
Yeah, what I use, I'll give you two recommendations. My pots at home are all clads. I don't think you can see the reflection here from the window cover. So I use all clads, which is my absolute favorite type of cookware. However, they are not cheap. If you're more on a budget, you could also use Winco, which is what I used to use before I had my all clads. So Winco is WYNCO, I believe. Stainless steel cookware. I used to have that, and it lasted me. I gave them away because they were still good after 7-ish years. That's what we use at work at True North. We use Winco cookware. In every pot, we have to replace about every 5 years. So for a home cook, that's 15, 20 years. They are not as nice, and they don't retain the heat, or they don't respond to the heat as well as an all clad does. But say this is I believe a 1.5 quart pot. This guy was in the $70 range. I can't remember exactly because I bought it as a set. But I'm guessing this guy would be somewhere in the $70 range, whereas that same size of the Winco would be easily half as much, maybe even less. But again, it's sort of your preference and your budget and how much of a food snob you are, like me. So those would be my recommendations.
That's funny. So Diane wants to know if you can recommend a good brand of knives. And Seema, no, we don't use any salt, oil, or sugar. You might be new to my channel, but we're all SOS free here. Both Ramses and I have written lots of books about that.
The recommendation on knives?
Yes.
Sure. This is what I use. I've always used this as my own personal knives brand that I use, MAC.
Nice. And let's see.
Also so this guy here is in the $120, $140 thing. What I love about them is that they're Japanese blade. They're thinner than regular blades, so that makes them lighter, and it makes them stay sharp longer, versus a German like a Henkel's or a Wusthof. They're heavier, and I don't like that. So that's why I really love the Mac. I'm sorry. But Victorinox also makes a good, much cheaper version of chef's knives. So where this is, I mentioned 120, 130, the same version of that would be in the 35-ish, $40 range for a Victorinox.
Cool. Dina wants to know if you've ever used ghost peppers.
I've tried them. I've never used them in cooking because they're just so damn spicy. But we have, my brother-in-law and I have sort of had this pepper challenge a couple of times. But he actually eats spicier than anybody else in the family. So.
Wow. But when there's I like spicy, but when it's too spicy, you don't taste anything except the spice.
Right. It's also I'll try to move the camera now that we're done with the cooking. Hopefully it'll stay. Uh-oh. Can you see me? There we go.
I can see you. And there's a question on how do you sharpen your knives?
Oh, here. I don't sharpen my knives. And
Uh-oh, you went away, Ramses.
I know. Okay. See, this is why I did not want to mess with the camera. Can you? Okay. So the questions were peppers. You know, peppers are spicy is sort of a flavor that your body automatically sort of builds immunity to. So the spicier you eat, the more your body gets used to it, and that's why some people eat spicier than others, because they're so used to it. You know, a ghost pepper to my brother-in-law is spicy, but not as, you know, as spicy it is to me. So it's, you know, a personal sort of resistance kind of a thing. And then the knives, I actually don't sharpen my knives. What I do is I take really good care of them. AJ, can you still hear me? You're frozen.
Yeah. Oh, I'm frozen. No, I can hear you.
Okay. I thought you were frozen. So what I do is when I'm done using a knife, that's, you know, the first thing I do before I clean up anything else is I wash, rinse, and dry my knife really well. And then I'll, excuse me, and then I will put the knife guard on it, and then it'll get put away. That way it's not going in the sink or the dishwasher, getting banged around with the pots and the pans or the plates or anything else. So I protect the blade as much as possible. I use wood cutting boards versus plastic or composite or any other type of cutting boards, so that when my knife hits that cutting board, it'll go into it rather than, you know, sort of bang heads against it. I will use that honing sort of steel to sort of keep the blade straight. So that's not really a sharpener. What that does is, you know, it keeps your blade straight. If you look at a you know, a straight blade under a microscope, it actually has teeth, so it's microscopically serrated. So what happens is, as you cut with the knife, so I'll use my fingers here as the teeth. So as you use the knife, the teeth start to sort of go this way, right? And so as you use that honing tool, it gets them all lined up again. And that's why you use it, you know, you use the honing thing and then you cut it again. It's like, oh, it's sharp again. And it's really not. What happens is you just realign the teeth. That's all you did. If ever I use my knife enough that it needs an actual sharpening, I take it to somebody who does that professionally as a living, and he does it every single day, so he knows exactly the angles, versus me doing it once a year, and I just don't have that muscle memory correct.
Nice, thanks. And somebody asked, I don't know if you'll know this one, because I don't know if you guys use wood chopping bowls, but how do you keep board. Mandy says, how do you keep a wood chopping board clean?
So how we do that is by wiping it down as soon as we are done with it. So this guy I would take, and then I would sort of wipe it down with a wet cloth. If it got, you know, pretty dirty, I will take it to the sink, soapy water, rinse it right away, and then you dry it right away. Okay. And then you don't lay it flat. So I always leave them standing up so that they dry out completely. And from time to time, I do use some mineral oil to sort of rub it all over them to sort of seal it, so to speak. Nice. Eventually they do start to absorb water and they start to crack. But the more you take care of them, the longer they'll last.
Great. Susie says, do you recommend the sleeve for knife storage versus a knife block?
Yes. So I think what she's talking about is this guy that I dropped. So this guy right here. So this goes right in here, and then it gets, you know, put away. A block, although it protects your knives because they keeps them from banging around against each other, you can't clean inside all those the grooves. So you could certainly develop, you know, pretty bad bacteria over time. Versus this guy's here, you can, you know, switch them out. Or what I do sometimes is I'll take a paper towel, soak it in like a sanitizing solution, and then I'll shove it in here with the knife sort of backwards. So I'll shove the towel in here just so that I get it all the way in here, and then I clean that out. So this you can clean versus a chopping block where the knives go in. You can't get in there. So.
Great. Well, this has been so informative. Thank you so much. I learned so
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome.
So guys, check out his class because it's really, really good and it's fun and it's self-paced. So, I think you'll love it. And there's a link in the show notes also to both of his books, and get to True North and watch him in person. Are you still doing cooking demos at True North right now?
No, I'm doing them with limited audience, and I ask everybody to wear masks, but we're sort of spread out. So before COVID, I would have 30 plus people in there. Now it's more like 10. So we give each other enough space.
Wow.
But yeah, so the link I sent you, AJ, is for a built-in coupon. So if you guys want to sign up for the advanced class, or if you want to buy both classes for an even lower price, the link in there has the coupon built into it. You don't have to add anything else to it. It's been very well received, as some of you guys have commented on it. Thank you so much. And it is a one-time payment, lifetime access. So this is not a reoccurring monthly or yearly fee. You just pay for it once, and then you own it, and then you'll always have it.
Nice. I just posted in the chat and it's in the show notes as well.
Cool.
Well, maybe one day we'll get Mauricio to do a demo.
He's shy. He's something. I told you have to ask Shada to ask him. If she asks him, I think he'll do it.
That is so funny.
She has his way with him for some reason. I don't know.
That is funny. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ramses. This has been great. And thank all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when my guest is Karen Snook from the Kindred Spirit Animal Farm. So we're going to be talking animals tomorrow, maybe even turkey. Take care, Ramses. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks, AJ. Always happy to see you. Say hi to Charles for me. Thanks, everybody.